Hi, my name is Loren, and I'm going to be presenting on the work I have done in the Yellowknife Greenstone Belt as we attempt to use portable X-ray fluorescence as a tool to aid in gold exploration. The exact model of formation of orogenic gold deposits is still debated, both in terms of source of the fluid as well as mechanisms for gold precipitation. Some models constrain the source of fluid as meteoric water, others as magmatic hydrothermal fluid, or as metamorphic fluids. One thing that is shared across all these models of formation is the importance of structure for these deposit types, both primary, deep-reaching structural faults, as well as secondary faults. The most generally accepted model of formation is that these deposits form as a result of metamorphic devolatilization. Regional metamorphism triggers devolatilization at depth. These fluids then interact with rocks over a large scale, leaching gold and other metals from the surrounding rocks. Then these fluids intersect deep-reaching structural faults and then travel up to interact with secondary faults. In these secondary faults, the porosity and permeability of the host rock is increased, and the fluid interacts with the host rock, triggering gold deposition. So we know we need multiple generations of faults, but one challenge is when we look at the Yellowknife Greenstone Belt, there's a complex system of them, and some structures are mineralized while others are not. Another challenge is the nugget effect that is inherent to orogenic gold mineralization. If a structure is mineralized, but the drilling in the area does not intersect the portion with high-grade gold, this can lead to the undervaluing of an area's gold potential. When we take these two challenges together, it means that an extensive amount of drilling and sampling must be done to understand these structures at depth. Taking a look at our study area, we are situated within the Yellowknife Greenstone Belt, which is located within the Slave Craton. This project is in collaboration with Goldterra, and we are focusing on the mineral claims that they have throughout the belt. In order to constrain the area further, we have chosen 3 representative drilling locations. The first is the Crestaurum area, which is hosted within the Cam-Mafic volcanics. The second is the South Belt area, which is also hosted within the Cam-Mafic volcanics, and historical drilling in the area has also intersected the Con Shear at depth, which was an important mineralizing structure for the Con mine site. And finally, the Sam Otto area, which is representative of gold mineralization within the felsic to intermediate volcanics of the Banting group. Previously, I mentioned that an extensive drilling and sampling program must be performed in order to understand the gold mineralization in the area. Just to give you an idea of the scale, I've included this photo from Goldterra's 2018 press release, showing the extent of sampling within their South Belt claim area. All of the data points represent drilling or sampling done in the area. For each drill hole they want to gain geochemical data for, they have to do traditional assay methods to achieve this. This includes logging the drill core for mineralogy and structures, sampling any area of interest, and sending the samples off to a lab. At the lab, the samples are turned into a powdered pulp, and a full ICP suite is run, in addition to fire assaying for base metal concentrations. When this happens on the scale required in a greenstone belt, this results in a very expensive and time-consuming process, which is one of the main questions behind the study. Can this process be improved both in terms of expense as well as analysis time? Which is where portable X-ray fluorescence comes in. For those not familiar with PXRF, it operates very similarly to lab-based XRFs. You place your sample in front of the detector window, and the gun generates an X-ray which interacts with the surface of the sample. The gun then detects the returning signal and processes it to display a geochemical analysis on the screen. This brings up a couple of questions. With traditional XRF, the sample must be processed prior to analysis by crushing and powdering the rock and compressing it into a puck. Can portable XRF be used to analyze the core directly in order to get a preliminary chemical analysis in a fast and efficient way? Another question is gold is in too low of a concentration to be analyzed directly. So is there a geochemical signal that can act as a proxy for the gold mineralization? So the three main objectives of this project are, first, to test the accuracy and precision of portable XRF on core samples, which are heterogeneous in terms of chemistry and also have a variable particle size. The second is to determine if any geochemical signal can act as a proxy for gold mineralization, and are these indicators different depending on the host rock lithology. And finally, how are the geochemical trends we observe in the PXRF data expressed in the rock itself, and what can be correlated with the process of gold mineralization? In order to do this, we selected cores from the three representative drilling areas and performed PXRF analysis every meter throughout the length of the core. We ran external standards every 20 analyses. We also performed reproducibility tests every 5 meters and calculated the average relative standard deviation to represent precision. We also compared PXRF analyses done on the heterogeneous core with geochemical assay values obtained from traditional assay methods done on homogeneous pulps to monitor the accuracy. The average percent error was then calculated for each element to test the PXRF's ability to reproduce traditional assay results. So taking a look at precision of PXRF analysis, on the x-axis I have the elements, and on the y-axis I have percent relative standard deviation. So for most of the elements, we're typically sitting around 30% or less relative standard deviation. Some of the lighter elements, like chlorine, or elements in lower concentration, have more of a range in the precision, but once again, 30% or less for most elements. Looking at the accuracy of PXRF analyses, once again, I have elements on the x-axis and the average percent error on the y-axis. Accuracy is within 1 order of magnitude for most elements. Once again, some of the lighter elements, like magnesium or phosphorus, or elements in lower concentration, like barium, have a higher variance in percent error. This is due to the PXRF not being able to pick up these elements consistently. Taking into consideration these precision and accuracy values, we have now validated that PXRF is a viable technique for semi-qualitative analysis on heterogeneous core samples. Let's look at some of the geochemical trends seen in the analyses themselves. So on this slide, I just have some very simple depth plots. So depth in meters is on the x-axis for each of these graphs, and on the y-axis is concentration of the element in weight percent. So I've included a drill hole from each of the 3 main areas. So Crestaurum, which once again is hosted within the CAM mafic volcanics, is represented by the blue data on the left. South Belt, which is also hosted within the CAM mafic volcanics, is represented by the green data in the middle. And finally, Sam Otto, which is hosted within the Banting intermediate to felsic volcanics, is represented by the orange data on the right. Another thing I've done is I have marked the point of highest grade gold mineralization in each of the drill holes with a solid red line. I've also denoted where the shear is preceding the mineralization to see if these geochemical trends are seen even before there is a sign of shearing in the rock. So taking a look at nickel, which is this top row of analyses, in the Crestaurum area, we see a pretty sharp decrease approaching the gold mineralization. We see a similar trend in South Belt, decreasing in nickel concentration, approaching the gold mineralization. However, in Sam Otto, we see the opposite trend. We see an increase in nickel concentration, approaching gold mineralization. So we're seeing the opposite trend in the felsics as we are in the two mafics. And taking a look at magnesium, which is this lower row, we see a decrease in magnesium concentration approaching gold mineralization in the Crestaurum area. However, we don't really see that same trend in South Belt. Magnesium concentration is pretty stable throughout the drill hole. And finally, in Sam Otto, we see an increase in magnesium concentration approaching the gold mineralization. Taking a look at vanadium, which is the top row here, we see an increase in vanadium concentrations just prior to the gold mineralization in the Crestaurum area. We also see a similar increase in vanadium concentration in the South Belt area. And we also see an increase in vanadium concentrations at the location of high-grade gold in the Sam Otto area. So that trend of vanadium enrichment approaching high-grade gold is shared across all three drilling locations. Taking a look at chromium concentrations, within the Crestaurum area, we see a decrease in chromium concentration. We see the same decrease in the South Belt data as well. Within the Sam Otto, we see an increase in chromium at the location of high-grade gold. So once again, for chromium concentrations, we're seeing an increase in the felsics and a decrease in the mafics. Taking a look at titanium, which is the top row, we're seeing a pretty strong increase in titanium at the location of high-grade gold in the Crestaurum area. We're also seeing a little bit of an increase in the South Belt area, although it is much less prominent of an increase. And in Sam Otto, we're also seeing an increase in titanium concentrations at the location of high-grade gold. Taking a look at arsenic, which is this bottom row, we're seeing an increase in arsenic concentrations in the Crestaurum area, an increase in arsenic concentrations in the South Belt area, and also an increase in arsenic in the Sam Otto area. So an enrichment in titanium and arsenic approaching high-grade gold is shared across all three drilling locations. And finally, some rather unique trends emerge from the mafic volcanics. We're seeing an increase in both antimony and tungsten in Crestaurum. However, we do not see the same trends in South Belt. Now, both of these are hosted within mafic volcanics. However, the enrichment of traditionally crustal elements like antimony and tungsten in one drilling location over the other might indicate a different source of gold or a different mineralizing fluid at play within the Yellowknife Greenstone Belt. Taking a look at some of the geochemical correlations with gold, this is just a table of R coefficients for each element with respect to gold. And I've separated them by drilling location. So Crestaurum and South Belt I've denoted in blue, since those two are hosted within mafic volcanics. And then Sam Otto I've denoted in orange, since Sam Otto is hosted within felsic intermediate volcanics. Another thing I've done is I have noted correlations that fall between 0.2 and 0.4 with yellow. And I've noted correlations that fall between 0.4 and 1 with green. So there's two geochemical trends that are shared across all three locations. The first correlation is with sulfur. Sulfur has a strong correlation to gold in Crestaurum and South Belt, and it also has a moderate correlation with gold in the Sam Otto area. Another geochemical correlation shared across all three areas is arsenic. There's a moderate correlation in Crestaurum and South Belt, and a strong correlation within Sam Otto. Outside of those two geochemical trends, most of the correlations vary depending on drilling location. Once again, this varying geochemical correlation might indicate that they are different generations or different sources of mineralizing fluid at play within the Yellowknife Greenstone Belt. So what mineralogical changes are we seeing in the cores as a function of depth? How are these geochemical changes that we see in the portable XRF data expressed in the mineralogy of the rock? So most geochemical trends observed occur in the siderophile elements, so we're focusing further analyses on the oxide minerals, as those tend to be the host to siderophiles. So I took thin sections that I collected from the cores and brought them to the SEM EDS for some backscatter electron imaging to see the relationship and textures within the oxide minerals. Taking a look at one of the Crestaurum drill cores, which is hosted within the Calamaic volcanics, we see very clear ilmenite to titanite replacement reactions. So this image on the left, which is taken at 5.5 meters depth in the core, we see ilmenite that has been unaltered. So that is distal to mineralization. Slightly more proximal to mineralization at 29.0 meters depth, the image on the right, we see that ilmenite has started to alter to titanite, and we see the presence of these beautiful ilmenite cores surrounded by titanite rims. Continuing in depth in the same drill core, this is taken at 102.9 meters depth. The image on the left shows that we still have the same ilmenite to titanite replacement reaction proximal to gold mineralization. And the image on the right is also taken at 102.9 meters depth, and we have unaltered magnetite proximal to gold mineralization as well. So these two relationships are showing that magnetite is most likely not involved in the gold precipitating reaction, but it's ilmenite that is involved in this reaction instead. So within the Sam Otto, which is hosted within the felsic to intermediate volcanics of the Banting group, similar ilmenite to titanite replacement reactions are seen. So this image on the left is taken at 328.5 meters depth. This is proximal to high-grade gold mineralization, and we see ilmenite forming inclusions within titanite. However, we also see rutile forming as inclusions within the same oxide mineral cluster. So it appears as if ilmenite is altering to rutile and titanite, proximal to high-grade gold mineralization. And this image on the right, which is taken at 327.5 meters depth, which is at the location of high-grade gold, we no longer see ilmenite in these oxide clusters. We only have titanite and rutile. So it seems as if at the point of high-grade gold mineralization, our ilmenite has completely altered out. So in summary, portable XRF is a reliable technique for a semi-qualitative analysis of geochemical trends within a heterogeneous core sample. Distinct geochemical enrichment and depletion trends are seen in PXRF data dependent on drilling location and host rock lithology. Correlation with gold also vary across drilling location, which may indicate a difference in mineralizing fluids across the Yellowknife Greenstone Belt. And finally, backscatter electron imaging of replacement textures shows ilmenite most likely interacting with the hydrothermal fluids and alters to titanite proximal to gold mineralization. Lastly, I just want to acknowledge our partners for this project, both Goldterra as well as the Northwest Territories Geological Survey, and also the NSERC Engage grant for the funding for this project.